Let's welcome our moderator, Mr. Lu Peixian, Marketing Representative of China of AVPN. Phillip Cornell, Senior Vice President for Global Affairs of Ignite Energy Access. And David Pong, Chief Executive Officer of Wateroam. We look forward to hearing your insights. Welcome.
Wait, hello. Welcome. So this panel is about champions for change. So we'll have two panelists representing two of the best award prize receiver and two companies addressing critical social and environmental issues in the world. So let's welcome Phillip from Ignite Energy Access and David from Wateroam. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So let's start with self-intro. I'm curious about who you are, what organization you belong to, and what's your recent milestone, what's new, what's going on.
Great. Thank you very much, Peixian. I'm Phillip. As you mentioned, I'm the head of Global Affairs for Ignite Energy Access. Ignite is Africa's leading provider of distributed infrastructure and services solutions. Now that starts really with power. We're the largest provider of distributed renewable energy across Africa and have a stacked services on top of that, including internet access, including financial services, and commercial and industrial electricity uses as well. We are serving over 3 million households across Africa with our distributed solar home systems, that accounts to about 15 million people. For us, the challenge really is how to meet the needs of the over 600 million people across Africa who still lack energy access, and our goal is to reach 100 million of them by 2030. I guess one of our big, most recent sort of headline news is that we're recently completing a big acquisition of NG Energy Access, which has brought our footprint across Africa to over 14 countries, and so that's very exciting. We're growing very fast this year, expected to grow about 4 times, and have been growing at about double every year for the past 3 years. So we're excited to see that growth continue.
That's great. David?
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for having me here. So my name is David. I am the co-founder and CEO of Wateroam, where we develop portable water filtration systems that are sent to communities in disaster-hit and rural areas. So we do this because 2 billion people out there are still drinking contaminated water on a day-to-day basis, and that's a cause for concern. Many of them will face diarrhea on a day-to-day basis, and this definitely affects them in their education and their livelihoods. So we build simple-to-use systems that are able to roll out in hard-to-reach places, and at the same time produce very high-quality, clean drinking water for such communities. Since 2014, when we started, we've been able to deploy this across 40 over countries for about 400,000 people. And we work a lot with various partners on the ground, NGOs, governments, various multilaterals, and organizations that help us to deploy on the ground. We've been privileged to be one of the awardees of the Zayed Sustainability Prize, and also thankfully to be recognized by other international organizations such as UN and the World Economic Forum.
Wow, thanks, David. Follow up with David. How critical is the water crisis? I want to learn more about the problem, right? And what are the most overlooked problem in the global community right now that you feel like we need to address?
I think the water crisis is something that we need to take very seriously. Firstly, the one that I mentioned is 2 billion people out there in the world still lack access to clean drinking water, and that's just on the water and sanitation piece. The second part of it is climate change. Climate change is causing many of the communities that used to have water, now they're lacking water. And those that used to have too much water, maybe now they're lacking water. So why this happens is because of the intense increase in terms of the hydrological cycle, and that's caused a lot by the rising temperatures around the world. We see that this means that many places will have to think a lot about water security. If they are not going to make plans, we will potentially see a lot of potential conflicts around the aspect of water. At the same time, a lot more communities are going to lack access to water supply. The third aspect to this is that the drive of increased industrial use and also domestic use of clean water is going to cause even greater, exacerbate the problem of water security. We see AI, the drive of the increase of AI actually consuming a lot more water required for cooling of data centers. So a recent study showed that every 100-word email that you ask ChatGPT to produce, it actually drinks 500 milliliters of water.
Wow.
From the data centers that require cooling. So imagine how many of us are asking questions on a regular basis. That's an aspect of fresh water that's required to be stockpiled as part of data centers. And where are we going to pull that from? A lot might be from places where it might be lacking of water in the first place. So we're going to have to think a lot about how can we manage the growth of industrial usage as well as domestic usage. We're seeing a global population that continues to increase. How can we manage to continue to supply clean drinking water equitably across the world? So on all these different multitudes of factors, I think the water crisis is something that we need to urgently pay attention to.
Oh, thanks, David. So, Philip, in many places you talk about energy access, energy inequity, right? Just energy transition. Why are you focusing on that? How serious is the problem? And given that you have a 5-year ambitious plan, share about it. Yeah.
Well, look, energy is really at the fundaments of human development.
Yeah.
So when we think that in Africa, almost half the population in sub-Saharan Africa is lacking energy, that means that that's a right to power and to all the services that are built on power that those people are lacking. And those are really human stories, right? I mean, that's about people that are, women that are giving birth in the dark. It means children that aren't able to study without light. And then, of course, it crucially also means lack to internet access and digital services, which are fundamental to the emerging global economy, as we can see by all of the technology that's on display here today. So making those bringing the energy to those kind of clients is extremely important. And now, what's the gap in Africa? It's really significant. So, if we go back to the mid-90s, there was about 25% access across Africa. We gained a lot since then.
Yeah.
In the past, in the years since then, we've climbed to about half. Most of that has been by expanding grids and energy grids. And that's really the low-hanging fruit. Now, the hundreds of millions of people that are left without energy access are mostly in extremely rural areas or peri-urban areas. It's really that last mile problem. And so distributed renewable energy and distributed resources are becoming this solution that makes that happen. And what we're doing to achieve that is really using a whole host of technological suites around how do we get data in terms of optimizing the outlay of that energy, but also using that data in order to provide potential investors and with finance with better information and therefore to de-risk that investment. And all of these kinds of strategies together are really bringing the cost of energy down. Because at the end of the day, the access to energy is about how affordable it is. So that we think that if we can bring that cost drastically down, as we have now, to something that's less than $1 a month in many cases, then that access becomes actually accessible also in terms of an affordable way to people across Africa and really changes lives.
Oh, that makes sense. Philip, you talk about you are growing 4x. You talk about you are servicing 14 markets, right? And you talk about you really need to bring the cost down. So I want to cover a topic on scale, on impact scale. So when you tap into so many different markets, what policy, what financial instrument, what strategy are you adopting most effectively to actually bring sustainability at a scale, right, to all the developing markets?
Well, I think there's a fundamental idea that our strategy is based on, which is that the business needs to be scalable so that impact can be scalable.
That's right.
We started in 2014 in one country, in Rwanda, and really perfected a business model that we could then replicate in other markets. We moved into other markets a few years later, once that critical mass was established and the business model was really established. And then since then, have grown very rapidly. So just in the year since 2018, as you mentioned, we've grown from 3 markets to 14. That's been through a combination of sort of hard-won organic growth by providing really the best service and the lowest cost service to the markets where we operate. But it's also happened through strategic acquisitions. So I mentioned the most recent acquisition from Energy Access, which is really going to increase our footprint significantly. But that's just the 4th acquisition just in the past 3 years. That's expanded us to different regions in Africa, where we find that while the model can be replicable, there's obviously particularities to each country and to each community. So the important thing about thinking about how we grow and achieving those economies of scale is also making sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that bringing energy and digital services to individual communities requires community buy-in. So you can't just be copy-paste to all of the places that you're going. So it's recognizing the differences in each market, both at the community level, at the national policy level, and in terms of the investment environment, but then bringing a model for growth and operations that's been honed and one that we're very proud of and confident of.
Oh, thanks, Philip. So same question to David. Philip mentioned community buy-in, community adoption, right? You are servicing, many rural markets, like resource-limited markets. And how do you turn 10 plus years ago, from an idea to such a scalable business?
I think our early years were marked with a lot of different kind of failures. Failure to get the product to be something that's adopted by local communities. We failed in terms of making the product something simple, intuitive to use, something that is easy for logistics to bring. We see a lot of the issues with bringing such solutions into hard-to-reach places is the cost of logistics. And if we were to stick to the same kind of model which a lot of other water filtration solutions would utilize, you require so much regularity in that logistic cost that it's not going to work out. So it's after 3 years of continuously iterating on our various prototypes that we finally came to an aha moment when we saw a villager actually pumping his bicycle tires with a bicycle pump. And we thought, why not we just incorporate technology that's available in our part of the world, in Singapore, and put it into something that's universally understood, a simple action which most of them are accustomed to on a day-to-day basis. So that was how we started off with finding a means to integrate our technology into a use case that is intuitive, that is something that people can see and understand immediately. And when we brought our first prototype like this into a village in Cambodia, stood next to a well, suddenly we saw tons of people taking their pails and buckets and coming over to queue up because they understood that this was a device that could get them access to clean drinking water. So it started off really like this through a little bit of encouragement, motivation when we see the response and feedback from communities on the ground and being so present on the ground that eventually today it's since been one of our flagship models, but we continue to expand and grow on those innovations that we have with the principles of design, which is it must be safe, simple, and swift. So it must be safe based on the international standards, so we reach the highest of tiers in terms of being recognized by the World Health Organization. It must be swift to bring in, swift to deploy, swift to be able to operate. It must be simple meaning that it can be operated without a technical know-how, not a very deep engineering expertise required. We see a lot of existing solutions such as centralized water treatment plants, which tend to not work as efficiently in many of these places simply because there's a lack of manpower with that expertise to know how to manage. It's not a lack of solutions. There are many great solutions out there, but many of such places, technical support will be limited, and so can we still deploy solutions that can work with limited tech support? So that's the 3 ways of principles of design that we stuck to. that eventually help us to scale up a lot more efficiently.
I see, I see. Well, so when I meet with many traditional investors and looking at Wateroam business, they will be like, oh, everything you said costs money. Everything you said is increasing your cost, right? So how do you balance? There's always a conversation between financial return and social impact, right? How do you balance that? And how do you make sure that your social mission is not only maintained but maximized, right? You achieve your social goal at the same time building a sustainable, a financially sustainable business, right? How did you do that?
So I think for us, firstly, the mindset of wanting to make this a social impact focused enterprise a priority. That was important for us because in the very early days, there were some VCs that came to us with the offer, I'm willing to put in a 6-digit amount, but you have to start shifting and pivoting into specifically the military and high-end market. We think your product has the technology, what it takes to do well in this market, but you gotta focus on this. So it became very challenging for us because our motivation and why we do what we do primarily came from a social impact standpoint. We wanted to serve such communities. It was a very big tussle for us. We had to debate quite substantially between the founders, but eventually we decided to give up on such an investment. It can be quite painful, especially when the finance is required, but looking back, was that the right decision? I think from the mindset of we wanting to focus on a more social impact balanced company, that was something that helped to retain us as founders who were passionate about this cause and continuing to fight for this up to today. So it's been 11th year, my co-founders are still working on this together, and we've continued to be passionate on this. So I think from one sense, mindset is important. We started off with that balance. We didn't want to just take it as it's a afterthought that we want to consider CSR or we want to do some impact work, but it's been built into our DNA, it's built into our company. Then from there, we start looking at who then can be our VCs. We realized that traditional VCs were not keen, like what you mentioned, when we say that first we are a hardware company, then you're a water tech company. A lot of these start to diminish the multiples you're talking about, even in terms of the potential exits. So we had to go towards more impact-based VCs, philanthropic funding, catalytic capital, debts with that element of it being a little more philanthropic and social impact. So we went towards that route, and thankfully there has been at least there is a good pool, especially in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, with the help of AVPN as well. We had some opportunities in those aspects to find like-minded and supportive investors. And so we're thankful. We are not saying that we're extremely strong in producing high alpha returns, but we have been able to at least generate positive returns, not at the aggressive level, but at a level that social impact funds will be able to accept.
Makes sense, makes sense. Philip, similar question to you. So David mentioned at one point he got pressure from potential investors, right? So when we talk about investors, financial institutions in a global stage, right? How do you work with them, right? Many of them are still undergoing this traditional investment philosophy, right? And how do you work with them? And how do you see financial institutions, capital, support your work, right?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think we're lucky at Ignite that a lot of our major investors and financial backers really do believe in the impact also that we're driving and believe in sort of the mission of bringing electricity to those that are underserved and to bring that suite of services to underserved communities. Certainly, we work very much, to your question, with international financial institutions who are interested in how we can de-risk some of those investments into emerging markets and developing markets where we operate. I think what's really at the sort of heart of Ignite as well, though, is about how do we solve those problems of de-risking capital and bringing down the cost of capital. Because when it comes to bringing these services and renewable energy to clients in these markets, one of the biggest hurdles is really the cost of capital.
That's right.
And so our innovations, for a large part, have been around how do we actually bring the data that's necessary to de-risk and demystify some of the perhaps uncertainties that might exist around serving some of these customers who might be seen as higher risk than they in fact actually are, which is what we see when we gather that data and really go through it. And so what we do is to also work with those investors to develop innovative financial mechanisms in order to bring and crowd that capital in. So I can give you an example. We've recently engaged, for example, in carbon credits, where we are selling carbon credits to a German customer under a new financial mechanism in order to create a new revenue stream. And that's on the back of using results-based financing, which is one of our most effective mechanisms that we use, which is really about showing that there's an impact on the ground as the money is coming in. And we found that to be extremely effective. We've found it to be very much welcomed by the markets and the countries in which we're operating. And at the same time, it also creates the infrastructure to develop these carbon credits, which can then be sold onto international markets. And all of this helps to, again, as I mentioned, de-risk capital. And so as we've matured and created a more flexible and more proved operational model, we've actually become very attractive to traditional capital markets and private capital markets, both on the equity and the debt side. So as we've moved forward, and particularly after, in 2023, winning the Zayed Sustainability Prize and all of the recognition that came along with that, we've suddenly been open to a whole new set of potential financial avenues, and again, have become very attractive to customers who might not be focused on impact and sustainability on the front end, but once they realize the mission and what we're trying to serve, that also becomes something that's very attractive on top of the risk-adjusted returns that the company is offering.
Thanks, Philip. I want to cover a bit about recent technology advancement, because Philip, you oversee the data management side of Ignite. And when we talk about recent change like AI, like robotics, and how does it affect you? How does it affect your work? How does it affect Ignite's business model? How does it affect the global energy market?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, our business model is very much based on data and how do we use really innovative technology in order to collect that data throughout the field where we're operating, and then to process it to make not only operations as efficient as possible and to optimize them, but also to optimize the data that we can then bring back to the market. And so we've been working, for example, with Google AI Labs in order to use AI in order to process that data and again to apply it to optimize and reduce costs around things like siting, maintenance, and other parts of operations. And so for us, that data management is extremely important. And with our new initiatives, including the Ignite Institute, which is something that I'm leading, we're looking at how can we take that data in order to use it in all sorts of other ways. So that could be everything from having conversations about regulatory changes inside all of the different countries where we're operating to create, to lower policy and investment risk in emerging markets, to thinking about how we can use this to improve our own internet service provision. So really working with technology providers like Google and like other partners has been really critical to make our business work better and to communicate better with the outside market. And that's in addition to all of the technology partnerships that we have throughout the value chain. So again, working with some of the best providers of equipment so that we can make sure that our product offerings are as resilient as possible and to really optimize that kind of resiliency around things like climate impacts and weather impacts that really are an issue for a lot of the customers where we're working.
Got you. similar question to David. You mentioned a bit the rise of AI, you increasing the water consumption, right? Increasing actually the energy consumption of the global market. There's some ethical concerns about the rise of AI, but at the same time, as Philip mentioned, he's using AI, he's using the most advanced technology to empower the business, to make it more scalable, and to solve the most critical problems. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so for us, it's an ongoing discussion and a big look into the business development aspect of it, especially since we crossed the 10-year mark. We're thinking of what is the next challenge in the water space that we want to tackle over the next 10 years. And we see that primarily, we're seeing what I mentioned earlier is a drive uptake in consumption in three aspects. First, you have agriculture, which is 70% of our world's water consumption is in agriculture. Second is in industrial, the increase of AI and semiconductor production, that takes 20%. And the last 10% is coming from domestic use. So if we want to fight water consumption that's increasing on a very practical level, you want to hit it where it hurts the most. That's the 70% that's in agriculture. So can we use AI to fight more efficient, to find a way to make it more efficient for agriculture, irrigation, nutrient management, and other forms of aspect when it comes to managing our ecosystems more effectively. Secondly, in terms of industrial, can we have a stronger closed loop system for wastewater management? That means that we need to recover the resources and water more effectively. Can we use AI to detect the kind of resources that's available inside the wastewater and tailor the treatment that's required in a low energy and efficient manner? If we really want to ensure that water security is there, I think one aspect is to tap on the 97% of water excess, which is in the sea. How can we ensure that we have low energy desalination technologies that can ride on the use of AI to tap on waste heat, to tap on heat that is or energy that's generated by various turbines that can be combined together effectively to lower the energy requirement when it comes to desalination. And finally, when it comes to reducing the use of domestic water consumption, a lot of it actually is in non-revenue water, which means utilities are having a lot of pipelines going out into various populations, but almost we're seeing 40% to 60% of pipeline water is being leaked somewhere in the pipeline distribution system. Can we find little robots, use of AI to understand the network of water and detect where leaks are happening? If we can leverage on these tools, it will make it a lot more accelerated in our efforts to fight water leakage in many of these aspects. For us, one of the immediate wins in the aspect of ensuring we are collecting data. So we've since developed our IoT sensors that are collecting remote monitoring data on the ground, and we are also adding the element of blockchain on it. The primary aim is first, like what Phillip had mentioned just recently about the tapping on results-based funding as well as carbon financing. It's something that we are still figuring out and much to learn from you guys. With the data that comes in from such remote monitoring and blockchain, it helps to and give our investors in this either carbon credits or in the results-based financing tools that is immutability in the impact that we're creating. So we're not double claiming and we have that clarity of where the data is coming from. So these are some aspects that we are leveraging on the trend of AI as well as other technologies.
Wow, impressive, impressive. Finally, I want to talk a bit about collaboration and ecosystem building, because that's mainly how AVPN is doing, right? Building a network of impact investors, supporting social mission, like social-driven, mission-driven startups, right? So I want to talk about collaboration. So all of you actually work with government, philanthropy funds, impact investors, traditional investors. How do you see this international cross-border, cross-sector, cross-culture collaboration model, right? How do you work with each other? And what's the call to action for you to the audience today?
Well, thanks, Peixian. Again, Ignite energy access has been built on collaboration, partnerships since the first day. And that works at very many different levels. I mean, it starts with collaboration with the communities in which we work, as I mentioned before, to really understand needs and to tailor solutions. It then goes up to how do we collaborate, for example, with all of the national governments in which we're working. Because, I mentioned how cost of capital, financial innovation is really key to bringing these solutions to market, but so is getting sort of policy right and making sure that we can help work with our partners on how to optimize policy for renewable energy and distributed infrastructure, and particularly in those countries where we're working in Africa, to move towards more comprehensive energy planning that includes distributed renewable energy as part of their plans. And that's both a national and an international mission. Previously, I used to work at the International Energy Agency, for example, and so working together with those kinds of institutions as well as development finance institutions in order to continue that dialogue has been extremely important. I mentioned the Zayed Sustainability Prize. We're proudly based in Abu Dhabi and have been working not only with the Abu Dhabi Investment Office and ADIA, as well as the Zayed Sustainability Prize organization, but also being in the Middle East and being in a region where there's so much activity going on, both on the technology side, on the policy side in terms of capital investment, and in terms of nurturing these kinds of businesses and this kind of ecosystems has been a huge benefit to Ignite. So being involved in this kind of collaborative network that the Zayed Sustainability Prize offers has been a great example. And then on top of that, all the partnerships that I mentioned before, both around sort of technology and suppliers, have been really key to how we operate. So my call to action would be continue to have these kinds of conversations and continue to bring together all of these different players in places like this, because this is where sparks happen and this is how we can ignite progress.
That's right, that's right. Thanks, Philip. David?
Well, yeah, so for us, the importance of this ecosystem includes many different stakeholders to be managed. Like what Philip mentioned, our baseline is to work with the on-ground partners, and that's a lot with non-governmental organizations that have boots on the ground. They have the understanding of the working culture. The language helps us to overcome the language barriers in all the different countries that we work with. The next layer is the multilaterals that also help to add on that layer of credibility and that SOP in how things are done in in a certain jurisdiction or a certain region, and then how can we replicate those same SOPs into another region, and making sure that that impact is monitored, it is registered, it is properly reported into proper case studies, and then we can use this to table it up to governments all across various parts of the world that we want to work in. That's been kind of the opera's moderandi that we are working on. Finally, of course, is the financiers. We need the various kind of financiers in the water space. Now, water is a bit tricky because for a long time, water has been underpriced. It's a very big debate about how much should water be priced at, but we see that going forward in the future, you need to really address the more effective pricing on this. If not, we're going to find it very difficult for investors to make a good case of having a good return on their investments when it comes to the water space. Yeah, so to sum it up, the call to action here is really political will. I think if political leaders, together with leaders of various organizations, come together and be willing to put their head together to figure out how to solve the water crisis, we can actually do something about it. We need so many of these stakeholders to come together. It's going to be tricky, but I think it's got to be one of the most important topics coming up, especially after the carbon aspect that already has been very prevalent out there.
Thanks, David. Well, that's it for this panel. Thanks.
Thank you, Peixian.
Thank you.